don't know about the rest of you, but it feels like I've spent a lot of the time between the end of the feast and now mourning. Mourning the loss of one after another of my brethren. Family. Whether that loss is in our personal families or in our church families, our grief is real. Even as if Mr. Bradicevic gave in his sermon out a couple of times ago, this isn't really life, and it really isn't, but the mourning is. Each of these deaths leaves a profound hole in our congregation, but various emotional and mental and physical holes in each of our personal lives. And so we grieve. That's okay, which is good. God doesn't say we shouldn't grieve. We should mourn for the loss of our brethren or for those closest to them. In John 11:33 and 35, we won't turn there, but in 33, it says, Christ was troubled by Mary's weeping. And in 35, that Christ wept. He didn't weep because Lazarus had died. He knew what he was about to do. He wept because of the pain that others were experiencing. He was weeping for the living. So point number one in this: grieve, but trust in God. God has a plan. It can be hard to remember at times. When we lose older brethren as we have recently, we've known we've lost guiding lights in our lives growing up in some cases. But people have shown wisdom and perseverance, and that's hard to find in the world. When we lose a child or an older adult, it's a vastly more painful to deal with because we're not just losing what we had, but we picture what wasn't and what could have been. All the events still never happen. God knows and understands all of us. He understands all of us, that we have value. He hasn't pulled away from us. He isn't blind to our pain. God isn't capricious. He has a plan. Though, as I said, we might not understand it. And we don't understand even how it works in our own lives, let alone that's even with the knowledge he's gifted us about what we do know of his plan. It's a gift which, those around us don't understand. Think about this. I'm sure everyone's noticed the little shrines that are up and down roadways in the U.S. now. People who've died in automobile accidents, and you drive by and you can tell it was a kid because there's stuffed animals, or you see groups of teenagers that are standing there. I think this is because so few people even go to church anymore. So few actually have a Bible that they own. Even people who didn't understand the same as we do believed that God had a plan, believed that there was something beyond this. But if you're not at all religious, this is all there is. So the people just standing on those shrines, a lot of them don't have any hope. Don't believe in God. How could a good God allow this kind of suffering? So what they focus on is where their loved one died. That isn't so for us. Please turn to 1 Thessalonians 4. We've been given a dim view of what the plan God has for the world. Unfortunately, due to the sin that's entered the world, that it isn't going to be pain-free. 1 Thessalonians 4, 13 and 14. Hold on here. That explains it. I'm in Timothy. Okay, there we go. But I do not want you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you sorrow as those who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who sleep in Jesus. Here it totally doesn't want us to be ignorant concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest we sorrow as those who have no hope, those who are on the side of the road without any direction on how to find hope. Again, he doesn't say we aren't to grieve, just we do so with hope. Grief is an expression of outgoing love when properly shown. Grief helps us understand the love we have for one another and helps us determine to be better in our conduct towards others. We share our sorrow with others. In that way, we show love for our neighbors and help them. Like I said, grief can be a healing force, but it needs to be allowed to pass. And that takes time. God loves us. Even in mourning, we need to keep this in mind. That way we can avoid becoming bitter with our losses or accusing of God of being unfair. To do so can cause us to push him away at a time when we should be pulling in closer to him and to each other, to be building and helping each other. So point 2, while in mourning, we need to support one another. This simple point might not be as easy as it seems because none of us have the same relationship with any of the rest of us. For example, I have 5 siblings, so 6 of us. If we lose one of our parents, or if one of the 6 of us dies, none of us are going to grieve in the same manner. We're not going to have the same hole in our relationships. This is why you can't understand fully how somebody else feels. So think of supporting one another as a no judgment zone. You can't think, why are you still so sad? It's been long enough. You should be over that. Isn't it time to move on? In large part, we have been shown that we have God's plan. In large part, what we're mourning is not the death of the person who is gone, but the effect on the people who remain. If I have a friend who loses his father, he's mourning his father. His mother is mourning her husband, who has been the person who has walked through life with her and supported her. He's mourning the wisdom that his father gave him. The grandchildren are mourning the father with the grandfather with the happy laugh that won't be there to pick them up and swing them around. I might be mourning him too as somebody I came to for advice or somebody who I talked to, but I'm more mourning the pain that they're going through. The loss of a pillar in the church, as you might say. Please turn to Ecclesiastes 3:1. When we're supporting somebody, there are things that we need to keep in mind. Things to do, things not to do. And I'll give you a few do's and a few don'ts that I thought of while I was putting this together. It's certainly not everything. But 1, don't quote Job. Job wasn't put in the Bible to show us somebody else had it worse than we did. The book isn't a club. Point 2, don't tell someone time heals all wounds. It might not. It could take a long time. And I can show you from some of the stupid things I did as a kid where I created wounds on my own body that they leave scars. Here's one I've broken multiple times. Don't ask someone how they feel or tell them you know how they feel. Like I said, my brothers and my sisters and I could lose a family member. We're not going to know how each other feels unless we've talked it over a lot. Don't tell someone who's young who's lost a spouse they'll find somebody else. Don't tell someone who's lost a child all they need to do is focus on their other children because they've got that huge hole in all the tomorrows they thought they'd have. Now they do. But first, let's go to Ecclesiastes 3:1-4. To everything there's a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Now, it feels like Ecclesiastes 3:4 gives us a bit of a blueprint how to support one another. All of us who have known somebody and have them in common have stories. Funny stories, advice offered. One of the best ways to mourn somebody in common is to talk about the stories you have with them. Because literally you've got there a time to laugh and a time to weep, because you'll probably end up doing both of them. I have stories like that for each of the men that we've lost in the last, 3-4 months in the congregation. These are men who I haven't seen in a while because of COVID. But I still feel their loss. I still picture the things that I can remember about them, talking to them before church, talking to them, afterwards. Things that, likes we shared in common. Physically. So tell the stories that we want to be there for our family. Be there. Let them know you were there for them. Let them know you're there if they need anything. That's especially true when you're talking about a widow or somebody who's lost their husband, because there are things that they're not going to be able to necessarily do for themselves. So physically, be there to lend a helping hand. Emotionally, be prepared to lend a shoulder to cry on. Because when you've lost somebody, you don't know when you're going to break down. Verbally, tell them what you miss. It builds a feeling of community. It means you're not alone. We need to be there for one another in these situations, and not be there with any kind of judgment. Show our lives to those, and remember that God doesn't forget anyone. We have 2 major family reunions coming. Trumpets, our church family gathers. On the last great day, all who were not called before. So above all, let's trust in God and support one another. Remember the plan. Remember how it turns out. I'm going to close in Revelations 21:4. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away.